Never acknowledge any other human being on earth as superior to you in your opportunity to become spiritually intelligent. Never acknowledge anyone you can see, look at. Never believe that they have a superior chance, opportunity to rise higher in this unique spiritual world than you can. Human beings are equal in the sight of God in opportunity. The opportunity for you to go as far as you want, as high as you want, is right in front of you. But because you live in a world of comparisons, of one person being superior and the other one being inferior, you automatically and needlessly and foolishly use that idea of superiority and inferiority, you transfer it to the spiritual world where it doesn't belong at all. But your intellect operating from memory and remembering how those other kids in the 6th grade were smarter than you, and how when you went out later and went to work, how other employees got ahead faster than you did, and they seemed superior in intelligence and grasping how to do that office work or factory work. You have brought this false reasoning into the spiritual world. Stop it now. I'll say it once more. If your heart is right, if you're sincere, no one on earth has a greater opportunity than you. You therefore have all the opportunity. All you have to do is take it. Yes, it really is that simple. All you have to do is take it, and to take it you have to remove the unseen obstacles, like the one I just mentioned, that prevents you from going far and fast. If you're in a place where it's sunny and bright and the sun comes down in a field, and if you're out in that field, don't you have all that sunshine? Yeah? There are other people around you too. Don't they get all that sunshine? See how that knocks out the idea of limitation? Of you hoping that you can get a little bit of it, and maybe you worry, maybe that person sitting next to you in the class, maybe they're getting your share. How many think someone else has your share of intelligence? Isn't it all yours out in the sunshine? Of course it is. If you remain in the sunshine. And if you don't want to be superior to the other person in any way at all. I said we switch from inferiority to superiority. You know, the dumb kid in class. Any dumb kids in the class, you know? The reason you are a dumb kid because you compared yourself to the smart kid simply because he could add figures better than you could. What's that got to do with you as a human being who was put here to develop? Nothing. But we didn't outgrow that comparison, did we? We will do it now. And we'll grow up all together into complete maturity right now. No time is necessary. You understand that? You know what's necessary? Insight, understanding, accepting a fact as a fact. And there you are out there. All the sun you want right there, as long as you stay in the place where it's sunny. Now I want you to think about that, and don't drop the thought that you can have all you want, because it will gradually and definitely dislodge your opposites thinking of inferiority and superiority. In the spiritual world, there's no such thing. Only in the human world, in the world of human competition, financial endeavors, only there are there rich people and poor people. Only there are the bright people and the dumb people. God is not concerned with what you are in the sight of men, only what you are in the sight of himself, but you're so concerned what you are in the sight of men and of women, huh? How about the opposite sex brought into that? You're so concerned that you're going to prove to be acceptable to someone else. You're letting that other person take over your life, and you don't see it because you don't know that you can transcend the opposites. Freedom consists of you being in the sunshine in that bright field all the time. And while you may see lots of people all around you, there's no possibility with the idea of competition for the sun to come up. That would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? You know where you are. And then, and only then, can you deal intelligently, wisely, and with real goodness toward everyone else out there. You know what the rest of them are doing? The sunshine is there, but they can't feel it. They can't sense it because they're looking down and they're creating their own shadow inside themselves, their own shadows that they look down on the ground. And they walk without looking where they're going. I'm describing you, am I not? And they bump into each other, and then they cry. Competition. How nice. How nice to know that there's plenty of spirituality for all who want it. All you have to do is want it. To do that, you do the early work of throwing out of your mind all ideas that you're either intelligent or stupid. You know the pain that you can go into right now, and I want you to see if you go into pain or embarrassment right now while I deliberately bring up something for you to consciously look at. School. Oh, that schoolroom is still operating, isn't it? You go there all the time, don't you? Remember the boy in the front row there, girls that you kind of liked a little bit, and that other boy who teased you all the time, and you boys, what was her name? You know her name. You know her name, don't you, boys? Yeah. She knows your name too, bro. She remembers you, but maybe in a different way than you remember her. How about the embarrassing situation when you were the only kid in class who failed the test? If it pains you now, you're still living in the 6th grade. And there's a very, very weird, useless fondness for school days going back there. You know, that's because you lived in the false security. You know, parents took care of you and paid all your little bills and gave you dinner, and you felt secure, didn't you? That's simply immaturity. You looked at life a little different when you got out of high school or college, didn't you? Now you're out there, and now you have to do it all by yourself. You have to apply for work down there, and you're terrified to even go in the office, right? So you regress and you go back. Don't go back. If you go back, you'll run into this massive contradictions in which you think that you have to be the best looking boy in the class. How many were you? Best looking? How many have doubts about it? Now I'm going to present the solution to you to all your problems. The solution is a journey. The solution is you doing something that you're going to fight, and that you're not going to understand at the start. that you want nothing to do with because you'd rather picture yourself being in that same, you remember what the seat was in school, don't you? Yeah. Fourth one back, the right row, whatever. You know who was in front of you and the side of you? And that kid who kept hitting your head in the back of you, tickling your ear with a piece of paper. Remember him? Forget him. And gentlemen, forget her. You're in school, which gives you a false security. The real security, and get ready for it, the real security that you can have arises from you being willing to do a certain thing. And here it is. You must be willing to be ignorant all by yourself. That's a strange thought right now. You perhaps never heard it put that way before, so we have to see what it's all about. I have to be ignorant all by myself. Now, to be ignorant in the way of the masses is to be ignorant as part of the masses. That evil group or gang or organization in which they're all ignorant of anything higher than the purpose of their group to make money or to persuade people to get what they want. All this is mass ignorance. And this is a hideout. All those 50 people belonging to that club, that group, they all support each other. They all lie to each other. They all depend on each other. These dependent people, these weak people, are outside you and they are inside you. To be ignorant all by yourself, which is necessary, absolutely necessary, if you're going to take advantage of the opportunity to become a true spiritual human being. To be ignorant all by yourself means to descend inside yourself and never mind what you encounter, but you stay there until you know from yourself that the only thing that has been guiding, misguiding, and tormenting you was the ignorance that you permitted to remain there, calling it wisdom. Now, the people outside of you never call their mass ignorance or stupidity. They call it intelligence. They call it a group come together for the enrichment of mankind, or some other equally misleading phrase. They are foolish. They live in folly. They call it right. You, being a part of the mass delusion, both outward and inward, you have managed, too bad, to conceal your ignorance from yourself. All the hostility and all the fakery and even all the pain, you have pushed that aside and made various excuses for it. For example, you say that, well, as soon as we pass that legislation, as soon as I get the money, then, while there may be pain there and confusion there now, then it will go away. Your mistake-making machine called self is taking error, and saying that it can be intelligence to rescue you. Now, the key phrase was, be ignorant all by myself. This is shocking. This is a new kind of pain and fear and agony. And listen to me, you have to do it. You have to descend and go through it. You can't excuse yourself anymore. You can't rationalize. In short, you can't lie anymore. You must be willing to face the ignorance inside, even while in enormous fear and anxiety at losing yourself. I told you, you lie and call your ignorance intelligence. Therefore, you're afraid of you losing your intelligence. There is none there to lose. How about a little special spotlight on that sentence? All you have to lose is false intelligence. All you have to lose is everything that hurts you. Destruction must precede construction. Yeah. But I want to emphasize the enormous anxiety, the throbbing fear, which you will verbalize inside yourself. You verbalize it by saying, all right, I've been told what to do to free myself of pain, but what will happen to me? Look how simple these instructions are. To save yourself from yourself, you being darkness. To save yourself from yourself, don't do anything at all. Now that has to hit your understanding and your consciousness, so that every time you are tempted to go into violent feelings, anytime you want to be timid and shy about anything, you're not going to try to get rid of it. If you try to get rid of it, as you have been doing, it will remain. If you don't do anything about it, it will disappear. The spiritual life is different magic, true magic, but altogether different. And you don't cause it to happen, but you allow it to happen. Allowance means sitting on the cold steps, knowing everything that's going through you, feeling what's going to happen to me. I've got to do something lest something bad happens to me. It's happening as you're saying that. And it continues to happen as you frantically try to reach out for some club, some group, some thought, some person to try to save you. You were saved by realizing there is no one there who needs to be saved. How's that for a point of reflection for a long time? Let's go on to a story that covers what we've been covering. Suppose you're driving along the highway. You come to a new town. You've never been there before. And you stop and you have some business to do. It takes over 2 or 3 days. And while you're walking and driving around, you see something unusual. You see a certain man, the same man each time. You see him frantically and anxiously chasing around the town. And he seems to be trying to find something. And you watch him, you're in a cafe, and you could see him out the window of the cafe. You can see him there. You park your car somewhere. You can see him in another part of town. And he seems to be looking for something. He's looking up the trees for something. Then next day you see him, he's back in an alley looking around the boxes piled up in the alley. You see him out in the countryside looking on the fields out. He's looking for something, but he never seems to find it. And this is where his whole day is spent. Night too, trying to find something. Already are you in the story? So he wonders about it, and finally his curiosity can't take it anymore, so he asks a resident of the town, what's going on? What's that man doing, chasing around like that? And the resident of the town says, oh, he's driving himself crazy. Are you driving yourself crazy? Yes. So you ask and you say, well, that's kind of obvious, but what's the how and the why of it? What's he doing to drive himself crazy? And the resident says, he's trying to find an excuse for his evil nature and behavior, and he can't find it. That's it. Can you make a connection between that little story and sitting on the cold steps, looking for a way out, for an excuse? Now, here's this evil man driving himself crazy, trying to find a justification, an excuse for his evil nature. In other words, trying to say that it is good, necessary, I have a right to behave any way I want. But how can a lie ever become a truth? It can't. That's what hell is. That's what hell is. A human being believing a lie, calling it heaven, and when all the supports of his heaven fall away, he is in hell. There's false heaven. False heaven, the support, looking for other people, as we discussed. You feel so secure in the gang. You felt so falsely secure when you were a child with a group of people you ran around with or as a young person. And then something happened and you were no longer a member of that group. Your supports fell away, your false heaven fell away, and you lived in the actual hell of your own lost inner state. Search. Know where you were seated on those stone steps, trying to find an excuse for trying to save yourself in order for you to be able to continue to pretend that you have a self which you don't. If your mind and your spirit go silent, then there is no movement. There is no anxious searching for salvation. Very quietly you sit there and you understand what you have been doing, trying to excuse your behavior in order to keep your so-called identity going. The plain fact is, let's see if you know anybody who wants this. The plain fact is, there is never any excuse for sick behavior. There's no excuse for any human being hurting any other human being. There is no excuse. Now, if you do bad things, doesn't that automatically mean that you are still looking for an excuse to keep your false life going? Yes. All projections of inner badness to other people means that you must frantically drive yourself crazy trying to find an excuse for it. And since there is no excuse, the only thing to do is to continue to go crazier even still. God in his heaven is just waiting and looking down on humanity to find that one man or that one woman who will obey instructions. No, I didn't say to find someone who's brave. You're not brave. When you're brave the way you are now, you're falsely brave, which is arrogance, which is phoniness, which is pretense. God is looking for someone who will sit on the cold stone steps in the terrifying darkness, not crying out for help to human beings, and sitting in that darkness until suddenly the light comes on, and the light comes on with the realization that the darkness was your own nature. With that impact that you're wrong and always have been wrong, with the realization of that, which is a right realization. To realize is right, and right is light. You disappear. The darkness disappears, and you're out in the sunshine. There it is, shining down warm. No more anxiety, no more trying to decide just what's going to make you feel good. Should I do this or shouldn't I do that? All that is gone. All that belongs to the dark dungeon, and you're out of it. The sunshine of spiritual light is shining right now, and it's shining right now in this room. Now, right now, sit very quietly. Don't try to save yourself. Just sit very quietly, and God himself will show you that there is no self who needs to be saved, and that is what salvation is. God is eager and willing to have you experience what we've talked about today. You be willing to experience what God wants you to experience, and it will happen. You'll know what it means to have all the sunshine you want all the time. Your love for the true reward must exceed your love for constant punishment. The higher reward that you want is anything that expands the higher viewpoint. This means moment by moment observation and right judgment as to whether you're giving yourself a true reward or a false one. And there's a simple rule. The simple rule is there if you will follow it. A spiritual impression, thought, a spiritual reward can never have anything pained or strained in it. A dark reward, a foolish punishment, will always attack your body, mind, spirit, moods, feelings, so that you are agitating, acting, doing something, being nervous. Now you have the choice whether you want to see the difference or whether you don't want to see the difference, and that's the whole difference. The evidence is overwhelming. A policeman goes to a scene of a crime, a detective goes there, and he sees a pile of evidence that a crime was committed. There it is. He looks at all the clues and the evidence, and he knows that a crime has been committed, and he knows who committed the crime. The evidence of self-criminality, that is wanting the thrill of fury when you are denied your majestic rights by someone else. The evidence is there. And this is the difference between a man or a woman who begins to recover their sanity, their soul, their spirit, who gets the true reward, and a person who degenerates even more. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story called Tiger Canyon. And this story is about individual self-salvation. This is, I want to underline the word individual, personal, your deliverance from yourself. Once upon a time, there was a long, dark canyon, 100 miles long and narrow. And it was a stormy place, rain, thunder, lightning, lots of the time. But it was dark and forbidding, sinister. An awful place to live. How would you describe your inner life, by the way? An awful place or a delightful place to live? Hardly delightful. And even when you try to kid yourself and say that you're all right, something replies and say, no, you're all wrong. And you wish you could block it out, but you never will. You never will block out that voice. Which is the reason you have a chance to find true life in this life. 100 miles long, Tiger Canyon. At one end, all the people lived in the misery because of the climate and because of their own nature. You see, the dark canyon the dark spot at one end of the canyon represents the darkness inside every human being. And they fought a lot with each other. Irritable, unhappy people always have the pressure in which they take it out, either outward or inward. Well, that's how several hundred people lived at one end of Tiger Canyon. Now, they'd heard of the bright land, the happy, warm, sunny land, way at the opposite end of Tiger Canyon. Problem. They wanted to go there, but they couldn't. And here's why. They didn't know how the tigers got there, but some unseen enemy must have put them there. And have you ever wondered about who's hurting you? You know, that physical person. But you sense there's something in back of it, don't you? All along the narrow canyon, from one end, which was occupied, to the other end, which opened into the bright, pretty land, tigers were chained to either side of the canyon wall. Every 200 or 300 yards, a tiger, fierce, glowering. You know, one of the fiercest things, watch yourself think when you look at a tiger. How many ever look at tigers? How many look at other human beings who look like tigers? You see them in a zoo, right? And you even shake a little when they catch your eye, huh? Your eyes like, no expression on their face, just the glowing yellow eyes. You're wondering what they're thinking, and you think you're right. Well, you're glad the iron bars are there, right? And you wish you'd look at someone else. Problem. This is your problem. How to get from the unhappy campground residents all the way the 100 miles down and pass by all these vicious chained tigers and get to the happy land. That's the problem. see the chains, while the tiger was chained to the wall, the stone wall, he could roam way over to the other side, so that anytime anyone tried to escape the miserable land, the tiger was there to stop them. And dozens of them all along the way. One man in the camp wondered about it and suffered great agony and frustration and bewilderment and even rage, because he had heard that he could be happy if he reached this other land. He was unhappy now. If he reached the other sunny place, he would be happy, and he was willing to go there, he said. He's willing to go there, but there's tigers, vicious tigers all along the way. Who put the tigers there? Always growling at night and threatening anyone who even attempts to leave and try to escape. All right, let me echo what you were always saying, not knowing. You say, why is life so tough? Why can't I just have everything I want? Little children do that. And they have to learn the hard way. Really bothered him. So he would go out from his house and go to where the first tiger was chained and study, ponder, try to figure out a way to get by one of them. He figured if he get by one, he might be able to get by all the dozens of others and finally reach a happy place. There's no way to do it. He couldn't figure it out. If you got too close, you know, like a guard dog will do. If you go past a factory or a house at night, the dog suddenly looks at you suspiciously, and for a moment he's silent. He's not quite sure yet. You get too close, he starts to bark, right? Well, that's tigers don't bark, by the way. You know that. I thought I'd inform you in case you didn't know. They growl. You get a little close to the tiger, trying to think, maybe I can slip by it some way. So we get a little close. There goes the old quiet, silent, threatening eyes again, you know. I see you've been to zoos. This is your position. You say you want to reach the happy land, but you don't know how to get by the tigers. What are the tigers? Let's leave him figuring it out while we solve something. Tigers are everything that's wrong inside of you. The tigers are inside of you. The rages and the confusions, the silent contempt you have for other people that you keep very carefully concealed. Oh, you hide that tiger. You don't want other people know that you have contempt in you for others, but you do, which is part of the tiger kingdom, which is wrecking you and scaring you. As I'm talking to you, identify 2 or 3 tigers inside yourself. This is important because I'm going to tell you how to get free of them. But unless you know they're there and can simply be an honest human being, you won't be able to go on from there until you admit that they're there. Don't call yourself spiritual or religious or a self-liberated human being or someone who knows all about the human mind and human ways. Don't flatter yourself in any way at all. Just be someone who knows there is a severe difficulty down there, which we've called tigers. Just know that it is there. If you do that, you've qualified to do what the hero of our story finally did. Are you doing it? Have you done it? The hero of our story finally decided he's going to have to be a little more brave than he had been. And he figured out the following plan in his mind. He said to himself, if I can go over to where that tiger is locked onto this stone wall of the canyon side, if I can loosen the tiger from that end of it, just drop it to the ground, maybe in some way I can slip by the tiger who's now loose. Maybe he'll run away. Maybe he'll be so confused he won't see me as I slip by him. But I know one thing is impossible. As long as he's chained there, he's the tiger of the canyon there, and I'll never be able to get by him. He'll attack me. But if I can have courage enough to loosen him, then at least the situation is a little different. But that requires a different kind of action on my part. See, all I've done now is sit there and study him and get hateful and mad and worried and wonder if I'm ever going to make it or not. At least this is something different, right? Even to think it. What he did, he saw that the tiger was looking over the way for a minute. He quietly crept over to where the tiger was attached to the wall. He worked his hands pretty well to what he should do, and actually unhooked the tiger from the wall. And the chain went down onto the ground. The tiger was free. Oh, I could take an hour describing to you the total terror that went through our hero at that moment, because he had at last confronted the tiger enough to turn it loose, so that it was an altogether overwhelming threat to him. This is a spiritual experience you must go through. Remember that point as I go on. He did run away, as frozen with fear as he was. He shook it off. And he realized that he was feeling different toward the tiger. He didn't understand it. But some force, some spirit of power that he'd never felt before had come in and was now directing even his physical body as well as his mind. And he felt himself walking toward the tiger instead of running away. He walked over, and he did the thing that used to keep him in frozen fear all the time. He stood there. Remember, the tiger is loose. Now, by the way, I should explain. The loose tiger represents you no longer standing at a distance inside yourself and suppressing them. You've allowed them to come up to your consciousness, to your awareness. You know they're there. So he walked over, and there's the eyes staring at him. Now, he was looking back into the tiger's eyes, but I told you that something different had happened to him, which is in your spiritual life, the Spirit of Truth itself now taking over and telling you how to handle the tigers in your life. He looked at the tiger, and for a while, nothing happened. The tiger looked back at him, and he no longer wanted to run away. He felt a new power that he hadn't had before he'd gone into this truly brave spiritual action. He felt a new power keeping him where he was and not running away. And then instead of him fearing and shaking and turning and running away, that's what the tiger did. He knew it was going to happen. There was an inner preview inside himself. He knew that something different was going to happen, and it wasn't him who was going to run away in cowardice, but the tiger, and it did. Its eyes flickered a little bit. You know, you ever seen a self-doubtful tiger? Probably not. He saw one that no longer had confidence in his staring power, because God has it all over Satan. The tiger trembled and changed his paws on the ground, its position on the ground, looked around. And you know what it looked around for? You'll understand the little side thought I'm giving you here. It looked around for an ally of other tigers to come and help it. Help. Which is what human cowards always do. See, when they're thrown on their own, when they come into the presence of the Spirit of truth itself, they crumble like the cowards that they really are and look around. Where's the group going to help me? Where's my spouse? Where's my bank account? You name it. And there's no response because there is no help for a coward because he's calling on other cowards to come and help him. Tiger collapsed inwardly and then turned away and trotted away. And the man knew, the hero knew, that its power was broken forever, that tiger. When you conquer one tiger, you will know something that God has known all along. But because you weren't connected with reality, you didn't know it. That all tigers are easily conquered. Okay, went to the second one. Far from the end of the canyon, right? The right land. He was weak. He made mistakes. But I'll tell you something about him and tell you something about you. If you have that first experience with that one tiger, you will be absolutely unstoppable. Because now you know the difference between fighting tigers with your mind and allowing God himself to fight them for you, to push them away, to make them tremble and go away. A little review. All the tigers we're talking about are in you. You have the fearfulness inside of you. That's the tiger. Well, look where we've come. We've come back to simple principles which you perhaps have heard, but you haven't obeyed. Face the problem instead of running away. How we go beyond that. And let's get our man in the safe land. Second tiger, the same experience. Third tiger, the same experience of the reality that was now living inside of him, being brave and wise for him. One tiger after another collapsed, finally ended up in the beautiful land and was happy. Write down this phrase in your mind, someone please, because now I want to apply that story a little bit more. God has no opposite. God has no opposite. See, truth in its heaven, looking down on that scene of our hero confronting the tigers, truth itself was not afraid of those fierce creatures, was it? Truth is not afraid of anything. Why was the man afraid of the tigers? Because the tigers were really in him. We're going back and forth from the application to the story itself. When you no longer have tigers inside of you, you won't be afraid of anything either, just as truth is not afraid of anything. There is no opposite to truth. The only place that opposites exist is on the level of the canyon, of Tiger Canyon. And if you want clear evidence of that, look out at society and see how one human being has an opposite to himself and fights with him, opposes someone else. Where there is you, there has to be someone else. And because you are you, you create that other person as an enemy, because if you didn't have the enemy, you wouldn't exist as a person yourself. You exist as a false person. Give that, among other ideas you've heard today, give that idea a lot of consideration and apply it to the inner tigers in your own life. And know that truth has no enemy. Truth doesn't have anything to hate truth, but the opposition exists only among tigers themselves. You remember I had the point that the first tiger who was defeated and knew that he was, he looked around for other tigers to come to his aid. And suppose they'd all get loose. Here were all 50 tigers, all in the canyon, all opposed to the one hero. In the first place, it makes no difference if a true person is confronted by 50 tigers or by 50 billion tigers. It makes no difference, because the whole light is always stronger than a million spots of darkness. But a little side point. As soon as those 50 tigers were together and all allied together against the hero, you know what the next thing they're going to do? They're going to claw at each other, aren't they? Oh, are they going to fight against each other? Because that's the nature of tigers, to have opposites. Getting from the dreary end of the canyon to the bright one means one thing: inner work. That's where the canyon is. Nothing else. No more justification. No more love of being nervous. No more, well, let's see. There's no such thing as making a truth too simple. Wouldn't you be foolish to go out into that canyon and just walk among physical tigers if the canyon actually existed and there were actually real tigers there? Wouldn't you be foolish to go out there? Of course. They'd claw at you and they'd get you. They'd hurt you. They'd terrify you. How come you endure? How come you can stand having all those tigers in you? I said, wouldn't it be foolish to go out to an actual canyon with actual tigers? You're doing it. The tigers are inside of you. Yes, they are the product of delusory thinking, of you wanting them to be there because you don't understand. But the question still remains, why are you tolerating delusions? Why do you continue to feel that you have to have frustration and hatred? That man, when he first was wondering how to get by all the tigers and get out to the other end of the canyon, if he'd been able to come awake right away, he was able to grasp everything and understand. All he'd have to do was go up and just walk by every one of them. Well, a spiritually good person has to go through the process of meeting the tigers. I'm saying this is work. Oh, we've got a lot of work to do. I say you have to do this, but I'm giving you a big leap which will show you how you'll be if and when you go to the very end, to the very last tiger. And don't ever think you've come to the last one, because there's always one more. Your mind is always trying to tell you when, look, how many of you know someone who's good, calls himself good, who's really bad? Everyone you know. You don't even have to raise your hand. Just think of the first person you know. Maybe hold a mirror up. Oh, what do you know? I created all the frustration because I didn't know that I didn't have to be frustrated. I just didn't know. Oh, but I heard an explanation about the whole process. I heard that I can't even allow the tiger of rejection of these explanations enter and bluff me and fake me, overcome me. I can look that tiger in the eye. You see, you're so afraid of everything. The fear is the tiger. You're afraid of what you're going to lose, and you're the false person who set up that false reward of what you're going to lose. You don't want to lose your terror of the tigers. I wish I could say that 10,000 times. You don't want to lose your fear of your terror of the tigers. You want to hang on to it. You want to agitate. You want to shake. You want to cry out for help. What are you going to do with it? One thing. Work like you've never worked before. Confront everything that is shaky. Now, you have the ability to see what is shaky if you want to. Confront everything. And when you've done your part, like the hero did, God will do his part. You will know it because you will feel different. Throbbing inside of all of you, listening to this talk, is a certain question of which you're unaware. You're not able to search inside yourself and isolate this particular question because there's so many conflicts going on inside of you and questions that they're colliding with each other. And the noise of their collision blocks out your ability to hear any particular one of them and bring it up to consciousness and go on from there to find a greater understanding in your life. So I'm going to tell you what you're thinking all day long. And when I tell you what it is, you yourself, as hearers now, I want you to isolate it and bring it up and follow along as we go along with the talk. This throbbing question is, what is happening to me? What is happening to me? You're out in the world where you have so many decisions to make, so many things to think about. And the onslaught of the world is so overwhelming. And it defeats you and confuses you. And like throwing dust in your face. That the only reaction you can have is, what is happening to me? It's too much. What can I do? You take that question, what is happening to me, and you are to take it from now on in the right way. Now you take it the wrong way. And you have to see it for yourself what that means to take it in a negative fashion. Which means, when the world attacks you, all the duties and responsibilities and chaos, you do say to yourself, what is happening to me? And that's the way you say it, with anxiety, with fear. All because you believe wrongly in the me and say, that is happening to me. In the first place, it's not happening to you at all. It's happening to who you assume you are. You are. What is happening to me? You're afraid that you're going to go down. You'll never get up again, maybe. You're afraid the defeat will be final. You think that the violence of the world is going to carry you away and you don't know where it's going to carry you to. What is happening to me? I've established, and I'm telling you, that no longer is it necessary for you to tense up 1,000 times a day, and you're to see that. It is no longer needful for you to get tight and nervous and panicky and say, what is happening to me? But you can Ask the question in a new way, and you must. Oh, you got fired. Someone left you. You have a loss. Someone found you out. On and on and on. That created a reaction, didn't it? Someone found you out. Let's get another reaction, a bigger one. Let's see now. Yes, the man giving the talk was right. That is exactly what I've been doing. Getting nervous and saying, what is happening to me? I'm exposed by that person now. What is happening? They're not going to like me anymore. They're going to leave me because they've seen what a phony I am. And you're examining, after hearing this talk, you're examining all your experiences, all the events, all the confrontations you have in the world, and then you're hearing yourself say, what is happening to me? But this time, another voice is asking the question, one that you have allowed to come in to displace the old one. Now, you'll understand a little bit what we're talking about. Not responding from the past anymore, from when you were a 10-year-old child. Oh, those awful things that went on in that home, you know. I don't have to remind you of that. All that is gone. You're using memory purely for practical purposes, not to activate false emotions such as screaming out, what is happening to me? Oh, so you got fired and someone saw through you after hearing this talk. Now it's different, isn't it? Now you're going to say, cheerfully, what's happening to me? What is happening to me? Right? Aren't you different already? What is happening to me? Oh, I know. I just got enraged because someone told me something I didn't want to hear. That's what's happening to me. Oh, there was a feeling of badness, of depression going through me, of irritation. There was a feeling that passed through me as a result of that experience. The answer to what is happening to you comes to you simply by giving you the facts of what went on inside you. That's the answer to the question. You no longer arouse terror by asking the question in terror. Oh, you didn't know that you get what you give? Why, that's one of the most preliminary laws in the books, that you attract what you are. Haven't you learned from experience when you meet the world out there and you're a little bit sharp with someone and they get sharp with you? Or that someone, you see a gloomy face and it makes you gloomy, back and forth. Okay? Ooh, now you're a spiritual scientist. Now, nothing shall dismay you. Nothing means nothing. What do you care what happens to you? I'm not talking about ordinary common sense of being wise in your daily affairs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you being a kind of a person who has nothing to be careful about because you're not protecting your false identity anymore. Cars can crash down the level of the ordinary ground. You're up in the mountain. Those cars can't crash into you anymore. And when you say, that's interesting. What is happening to me? You are now apart from yourself. You're no longer that cheerful little girl. Girls, Remember how it scared you when you heard your parents quarreling? You remember that, don't you? Remember how it scared you when you heard that news about something? Deliberately pull it out of your memory. You get scared of those other people who weren't getting along, or some tragedy had happened to them. And all those people yelled out. Here you were, a little girl, an 8-year-old girl in that room, and all the 10, 12, 20 people in that room, they were all saying with their voices and their facial expressions and their gestures, they were all saying, what is happening to me? And you took that on as being good and necessary for you to repeat. Right? No more. You boys too, you saw it with your father, maybe with someone else. You saw how fierce he could be, and you saw how hard those male relatives in your life were. And too bad, isn't it, that you didn't notice that hard-faced man. You didn't notice how scared he was. But you didn't. So you took it on and you repeated that. Here's a highway engineer, one of these professional men who study streets and avenues and the broad highways that cut across the countryside. There's been a lot of problems out in the traffic. So he goes out and he gets on a position where he can view even the small streets and the highways all at once. You can see how everything comes together, how all the streets intersect. He gets on a hill, and he has binoculars too. And he has his notebook, and he stands on the hill. No, he has a chair because he's going to sit there all day long. His observations are very important, and he makes notes of what he observes. So he looks off in one direction, and he sees 2 or 3 accidents. And he makes a note, accidents over there because of too sharp a curve. He notices how the traffic is backed up, too many cars and too little freeway. So he makes a note at that, add another lane to the freeway. He notices another place where people are going too fast, exceeding the speed limit by far. Makes a note of that. Has the right attitude, the scientific attitude. He's just asking, look, impartially. He's not connected with that wreck. He's not backed up in the traffic. He's apart from all that and making the notes on it. You should be making notes now in your mind, at least, of what you're hearing. He's making notes of that. And that, seeing the problem, is the answer. Of course, he takes his recommendations back and they broaden the highway or whatever they do, put a new signal over there. They do it over there, and there's no problem. Is he going into stress over that? Not at all. Is he getting anxious over the car crash? No, he has nothing to do with it. Who you really are has nothing to do with the problems of this very ill society. Why do you insist on descending to that level when the way has been provided for you to be on top of that hill as a very relaxed, he's relaxed in that chair, isn't he? As a very relaxed person, understanding what is going on. He's asking, what's going on in the traffic? What's going on in the inner traffic inside of you? You have work to do. Your work is that of instant to instant self-perception of where there is a wreck, of where you are racing forward far above the speed limit with your impulsive remarks, with your useless emotions. This is the key to you being able to quietly sit back and say, what is happening to me without any concern at all? Because you understand that the seeing of it is the answer to it. You have to notice, therefore, at the time it happens where you are sad, where you have fears of something, truth never taught you to be afraid. Falsehood, lies taught you to be afraid. Who are you obeying? Work hard, please, at seeing the unnecessary as unnecessary, the useless as the useless. See that and it's done. It's finished. All over. Now, instead of being one of those drivers recklessly hurtling ahead on the highway, then getting in a crashing into another reckless driver, huh? Instead of doing that, you're up on the hill and knowing what is happening. Now you have it. Now you can say, what is happening to me? Without taking responsibility for the answer or the solution. Don't you dare ask, after you ask what has happened, don't you dare ask, but what am I going to do about it? That's the 8-year-old girl talking. The 8-year-old boy who's still active inside of you. Unnecessarily. I've given you explanations as to how the explanations can come to you. Me telling you the facts is not enough. It's your life. You're hurtling down the highway. You have to do something about it without asking, what should I do? You understand that? And I'll tell you, as a broad generalization, any kind of worry, self-concern, whether you know it's there or not, any kind of worry is a false solution. That's right. Look. I'll ask you why you worry at all, and you will possibly say to me, because it seems like a necessary act of self-preservation. Exactly, it's a necessary act of self-preservation, the very opposite of what you should do. You should never protect yourself. Yeah, you're being kind to the wrong person. You're being gentle. You're being gentle with something with whom you should be absolutely firm and unyielding. You know what it means to be decisive? You know the word. Decisive means there is just one thing operating, just one force, one power. And when you are decisive, really, which is a spiritual power, it's a spiritual thing. When you're really decisive, nothing but that. There's only one thing, and that is what looks at and is the higher answer to the thousands of false answers that you have on. And what it says is the decisive power that you get from on high. It says just one thing. It speaks in a higher way. It says just one thing to all the wrecking answers that you have, which is one word, which is out. When truth says out with an exclamation point after it, the thousands of of chains that have bound you, go. Fall off. See, this is one thing. Now let's talk about that. Ooh, this is fascinating. Aren't you tired? Aren't you weary of so-called self-power, self-effort? I'm going to do something about my alcoholism. I'm going to do something about always being worried about losing someone precious in my life. They're precious because you describe them as that. How about your sudden turning against someone that you call valuable to you? That means you've set them up as valuable, and therefore you're depending on them. Therefore, they're really not valuable. They're a necessity, an addiction to you. Back to the point. I'd just like to sit here quietly for the rest of the talk, but I guess I won't. I'll keep talking. It's, you know, it's so nice to have nothing to do, but just sit back and look around and not be bothered by faces, wondering if your next remark is going to be a brilliant one or whatever. It's so nice just to, okay, I'll go on to the top. Suppose you're living out in the country, nice, isolated. That appeals to you, doesn't it? Aren't you tired of crashing cars, traffic, your neighbors fighting, you've got enough of your own? Doesn't that disturb you when you hear other people fight? Hearing other people fight, I'll tell you what it is. It's sad, isn't it? The neighbors next door, and you hear them screaming at each other. There's something you do that should respond. That is, my understanding, it's a sad, pathetic situation, because you know that beyond the harshness toward each other and the cruelty and the sharp remarks they make toward each other, the screaming, you know that they're sad, don't you? You know that they don't know any other way to behave, to solve the problem. If you can be sad toward them in the right way, that simply means you understand. There's no sentimentality. There's obviously not taking the sides of the wife against the husband or the husband against the wife. You simply know that they are lost like you were once lost. You hear that man angrily condemning his wife, and the wife screaming back with a combination of fury and tears. You ladies say, yeah, I used to do that, either outwardly or inwardly, huh? Now I understand. I'm talking about that kind of a comprehension toward people. You live out in a pretty place in the open fields, and maybe about a mile away, there's a shrine of some kind, a building used for spiritual purposes, and there's a bell in the top of the building. And over the years, as you live there, every day at a certain time, the bell rings out, and it's pretty. The chime is so nice to hear, and 2 or 3 times at certain times every day they ring the bell. And you go about your business. You're working out in the garden or in the house or driving away or coming back home, and you hear the bell. You'll find that it becomes very familiar to you. And it's pretty. It's just nice. And then after a few years, 5 years, you live. Isn't that nice? At least you've got 5 years in the countryside before they build a housing tract. Move. Go farther out. Go to Idaho. Getting crowded there too. After 5 years, you come back home one day and you hear the bell again. But instead of just going on with setting the table, which you were doing, your head jerks up a little bit. You do a double take. And then you go back to setting the table. Then it rings again a few hours later. And you notice something different about it. And you wonder what's going on. So you keep listening. Definitely, very definitely, there's something different about that bell. And you don't know what it is. You listen, and you wonder why you noticed it in the first place. You've been forced by the fact that there's something different in the sound of that bell. I'm talking about the bell was replaced. That's what you find out. Someone had taken the familiar, your original life that you've been hearing before we got ruined by society. Someone came along and put another bell in its place, another way of living, a social code, the habits, social habits. Someone came along and changed things. Now, what I'm asking you to do is to know that you have that original sensing of the original bell, which was pretty. Something came along and replaced it, didn't it? And they replaced it with your consent. Now we have to get away from the bell and talk about you. Have you yet been able to listen with spiritual hearing to where you can go through your work day down at the factory, shopping at the supermarket, where all you hear is the replacement for what is real, what was original? Can you hear that everything people do and say, it's all false? Can you do that yet? Do it. Do it now. Your real nature can do that. Let's see how we can go with this next point. Every human being on this earth is either living from his mind or is living from his spirit. I'm not going to go fast on this point. I want you to absorb it. Everyone you meet, now put yourself into this too. You're part of everyone. Everyone on earth is either a mental human or a spiritual human. Now, get out of your mind any ideas that you're going to meet a spiritual human as you go about your business out there. You're not. Now that you've done that, bring it back to yourself and ask yourself whether you're mental or spiritual. To be mental, make a little chart on this if you want. To be mental means you have loads of difficulties that you never could get rid of. To be mental means you don't know what to do with yourself, which means that you have created and are hanging on to your old nature and then asking what to do with it. Get rid of it. When you're mental, you can think that you're spiritual. Right? Know anyone like that? Look close to home on that. When you're really spiritual, you really know it. Not from your mental, but from the spiritual itself. This means you've come back home. And remember, you remember the prodigal son lost out in the wilderness, wandering out in the wilderness? The son had to go back home. The home did not go back to the son. You know what's that representative of? That you have to go back home to truth, to God. Reality is not going to come to you. That means truth. See, in your mind, You now think that truth is fierce and demanding and wrong. That's you that's fierce and demanding is wrong. Truth is 100% compassion, love, caring, and understanding, which means that it understands that it cannot compel any wandering man or woman to come to it. Therefore, it's not going to compromise. It's not going to put out weak platitudes in order to attract a human being. It's not compromise. That's the best word. Let me lower the illustration a little bit. If you were wrong, and you have someone, if you're wrong and someone tells you that you're wrong, you have a friend, right? You're wrong, someone. If you're wrong and someone tells you that you're right, you have an enemy. What are you going to do with everything you've heard today, by the way? I'll go on a little bit more. What are you going to do with it? I'll tell you what to do with it. In the next few days, don't block the process by which it can filter down deeper into you and be the revelation. Notice how active your mind is in still trying to figure things out for yourself, and then don't allow that self-figuring to continue, but to be willing to not know the answer. Isn't that an astonishing thought in itself? I'll repeat it. Be willing to not know the answer. That means, when you're in this state, that means that there's not this faker, this counterfeit person trying to figure out ways to keep itself going. That's what's happening now. The counterfeit personality, the counterfeit self, uses the intellect, the mind, to preserve its existence inside of you. Aren't you going to do everything possible to put it out of your mind, out of yourself? The way you do that is to relax and watch the operation of your mind. And this talk has been just filled with guidelines for you to just know what's going on inside your mind. Do it right now as I'm talking. What's going on inside of you? Do that. The awareness of the faults makes you want to decide against the faults and in favor of the true. You don't therefore have to do anything but become a conscious, aware, understanding, perceptive human being who knows what is going on inside. What is happening to me? What is happening to you is that you're defending your life as if it's your life, but it isn't. It's your non-life. Now you know what's going on inside of you. At the instant you really know what's going on inside of you, you next know that you must not, cannot do anything about it. And when you do nothing about it, truth will. The Spirit of truth, when it is living in and through a human being, that Spirit. Now, understand that I'm not describing you, and that will be helpful if you know that. The Spirit is not concerned over anything. You are concerned over everything. The Spirit is very relaxed, and it can come into a room, and it can walk out of the room. It has no compulsions. It doesn't have to obey the tyrannies of the past. You are now compulsive to obey what you heard in that room full of crying and angry people. They told you that that was a good and even an exciting way to be. Allow truth to show you how to be disobedient to evil, and it will do so.